Welcome to the Create a Life You Love podcast, the go-to podcast for people who are called to make a positive impact through the power of coaching. You'll hear encouraging stories from coaches sharing their journeys and their lessons learned along the way, tips from top experts who help coaches thrive in their life and their business, and so much more. So if you're ready to create a business and a life of impact that you love, let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of the Create a Life You Love podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Chantal Cox. I'm an author, speaker, transformation neurocoach, and certified life purpose coach.
And I am Guin White, a human design specialist and certified virtual coach, specializing in work with introverts.
Love it. Together, Gwen and I are on a mission to dramatically transform and create community in the coaching industry by supporting you in saying no to complicated cookie cutter strategies that just lead to burnout and saying yes to simplification with a focus on alignment, service, and impact.
Absolutely. And with our combined experience and areas of expertise, we're really here to help you create aligned momentum in your business and your life.
Absolutely. And one of the ways we do that is goes well with a shout out to our sponsor, the Create a Life You Love membership, which is an active community of passionate, purpose-driven coaches who are up-leveling in the most powerful ways to increase their knowledge, momentum, and impact. And for more information and to apply, you can check out createalifeyoulovecoaching.com/membership today. And any links we share will be in the show notes.
Absolutely. And kind of transitioning, of course, we've been dripping out a human design masterclass series in that membership. And I am so excited. We are both so excited to be here today with spiritual mindset coach, podcaster, and truth speaker, Kehla G. Kehla is currently living in Victoria, British Columbia. She's been online in her business for about 4 years now. She's a 6'2" sacral generator and spiritual mindset coach specializing in work with entrepreneurs. She coaches beautiful souls on how to embody their human design and gene keys so that they can be empowered AF in their entrepreneurial journey and create sustainable business that's energetically aligned for them. She's also the host of an amazing podcast, highly recommend, called Living in Fierce Alignment, which has, over 300 episodes. And she's had 75 plus interviews to date. And as someone who is deeply passionate about human design and gene keys myself, I've been following or stalking our guest for the last couple of years on social media. And every time she sends out an email, I'm like hanging on every word. She's amazing. It's such an incredible honor for me to introduce her. So welcome, Kehla. We're incredibly thrilled to have you here on the show. How are you?
I'm better than I was before. This conversation is so good. And I'm just loving, my heart is so full just hearing that entire introduction, the mission that you ladies are up to. And I can just really feel the heart and the drive and the commitment. And so I just feel so inspired and I feel so privileged and honored to be invited to come on and have this conversation with you. So thank you for having me on. I'm really looking forward to this.
I'm so thrilled that Gwen had the connection with you, invited you, and that you're here today because I'm just starting to kind of learn about my own human design, and I'm starting to apply what I'm learning into my life and into my business. And I've not yet been formally introduced to the Gene Keys, so I'm super excited to hear all about that system and discover how it can facilitate your entrepreneurial journey. I've got my pencil, I've got my notebook, I'm so ready. But before we dive super deep into that, Kehla, could you tell us a little bit about your journey of creating a life that you love through coaching? What did you do before that? How did you get started?
Yes. So I had my first exposure to coaching back in 2014. And the funny thing is that it was in person. I was doing a lot of personal development courses. And so my interaction and experience of coaching was literally in person. And so I thought about having a coaching business for about 5 years before I actually initiated it in 2019. And so during that time, I had finished my teaching degree. I was a teacher. I have a B.Ed in physical education and French, which I'm not doing anymore, obviously, but there's many skills that have transferred from that. And then after that, I was a personal trainer, and that was my first real shot at entrepreneurship. So that started in 2016. And then in 2019, I moved online and I started doing online coaching. And so it's really interesting because when I came online, it was very shiny and it was just lots of talk about money. And I feel like I had lost my connection to the art of coaching from 2014. And I really got sucked into this vortex. And I feel that now, after 4 years in business, that I've just really learned like what's an integrity, what's not, like how to be inclusive, how to really support people, and come back to like the mission that you really shared in the beginning of this conversation around like really wanted to create a community with coaches and create that supportive environment that revolves around people. So when I started my business in 2019, it's been a roller coaster, to be transparent, which I'm always open about. And I started out as a spiritual mindset coach where it was like I was just working on mindset, kind of general coaching with just sharing my passion. But then it was in 2020 I started to hear about human design, and I was like, what is this thing? Like, I'm curious. So I looked at my chart, and then I was incredibly overwhelmed, and I was like, I'm just gonna leave this over there, like, see you later, like, I'm not gonna go into this. And it kept coming up, and so in 2021 I decided to go full in, and I went and I did like a 9-month certification program, and that's where I also learned about the gene keys. And then near the end of 2021 I was like, okay, I'm really passionate about entrepreneurship, and I really want to support entrepreneurs with their embodiment of human design and gene keys in their business, because it's just what lights me up. Like, I have no other words for it. And so now we're coming into, like, we're obviously in 2023, and it's like this is what I've been doing the last over a year and a bit specifically, but my coaching and experience has been over several years. It's just shifted and morphed over time. And so now I feel like I'm really living my purpose, and I get to connect with amazing people, and I'm just like really full of gratitude. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
So cool. It's so interesting that you come from a teaching background as well. Chantal is an educator by education and also by trade. But yeah, I think we're all teachers in a way. And, you know, we look particularly into our design codes and I see teaching kind of everywhere when I look at almost every, you know, chart that I look at, there's some component. So clearly we're here to teach each other, which I find so beautiful. I also have like a strong passion for health. So I love that you also have that as part of your journey. That's really something that, yeah, I think from the time I was little, my mom was a co-op shopper from way back in the 70s. And yeah, I grew up with granola and safflower oil as opposed to white bread and bologna. So yeah, I've had a health journey as well. And I've been studying gene keys since about the time I started learning human design as well. And I came into it around the same time. You have clearly exploded. It's amazing to me to see the different paths that we take, particularly in sharing, you know, what we learn. I've found the gene keys particularly to be this wonderful companion system to human design as I've learned that system. So for me, it's really enhanced and augmented my knowledge and embodiment of design. And I even actually had a chance to work for the Gene Keys organization, helping them with their events for a very short period of time. It's a lot of fun. And since many of our listeners, including Chantal, are not super familiar with Gene Keys, I would love for you to share a little bit about that system, what it's about.
Yes, I really resonate with the word like companionship that you mentioned, because it's interesting. I'll talk a little bit about human design as well, just so that people understand, because obviously, like, I really bring these two systems together. But basically, The gene keys is very fluid and it's more contemplative, where the human design is more structured. It's like, okay, you have your types, your strategies, your authorities, and it's more of a roadmap of how you're designed to show up and be in alignment in the world. And the gene keys is just so elusive. And so it's funny because I feel like a lot of times when people first discover the gene keys, they're very much like, well, what does it mean? Like this word, it doesn't make sense. And it's like, that's the point. You need to sit with this and be like, what does it mean? And just, it's like a slow burn, like time under tension at the gym. You're going to sit in the uncomfortability and then great things are going to come from it. So basically, the way that I summarize this, so Richard Rudd is the founder of the Gene Keys. I always acknowledge this when I share his work. And Ra is obviously the founder of the Human Design System. And so Richard and Ra at one point actually worked together. And so when we look at the human design body graph, for example, and you're seeing this, you see all the shapes and the channels and the numbers. The numbers are gates in human design. There's 64 of them, and there's 64 gene keys, which are connected. So it's the same because they come from the I Ching system, which is the Chinese divination text. So I always like to acknowledge that as well. And they represent the 64 hexagrams. So these hexagrams are 64 archetypes. And each of these gene keys or these gates, they have 3 different frequencies. There's a shadow, there's a gift, and there's a city. So with the gene keys, it's about contemplating your experiences mentally, emotionally, and spiritually of how you experience these frequencies in your life. So when we look specifically at the gene keys in the human design chart, we have the planets. So you see the little symbols, and then you're going to see the numbers and the lines in the symbols on the 2 columns. And in the gene keys, there's 11 planets that are taken from the human design chart that create the 3 different sequences in the gene keys. And the 3 sequences have a different theme. So the first sequence is the activation, then we have the Venus, and then we have the Pearl. So the activation is really about your physical experience, your challenges that you have in your 3D realm, both consciously and unconsciously. And once you find core stability in that, it gives you the space in the Venus sequence to really focus on your inner child healing, your inner wounding, the triggers that show up in relationships, because the purpose of the Venus sequence is for us to be able to open up and connect more with people in our life. It's really about tapping into unconditional love. And then with that, we lead into the Pearl sequence, which is about prosperity, but it's not about money. The prosperity is really about tapping into like being present in what it is that we have currently in our life and really seeing the prosperity in every moment, every person, every interaction. And it's really shifting that because it allows us to look at, well, how can I actually be of service? How can I be a contribution? And it's through that that we create collaboration and connection with other people. And then we actually get to make a really big impact. So I love to take the gene keys and I've moved this into the lens of entrepreneurship. And I love to talk to people about how they can leverage these sequences and their gene keys and their lines and all of it into how they can actually show up in the most authentic way possible in their business. So that's my long-winded explanation, but I hope that that was clear. And I feel like Chantal, you'd be able to give me feedback on that because you're so new to this, right?
Yes, I love that because I feel like at least all the listeners that were with me prior to bringing Guin on as a co-host, like pretty much none of us knew anything about human design. So like we're kind of at the same learning space. So yeah, I love that. But then obviously Guin has brought in a ton of people who are like way further ahead on their human design journey, and they're totally picking up everything. So I guess I'm curious, like I love your description. It kind of makes sense to me that it's more contemplative, and then the human design, like what we've addressed so far, is more kind of like the structured roadmap. So that's good going in to know. Um, and so how, because most of the audience is in the coaching space or online entrepreneurial space, as well as the 3 of us, like how do you use it in your business, and why would you use it in your business?
I love this question. So let's talk about, I'll give you an example with the activation sequence. So the activation sequence is the first sequence. And like I mentioned, it's about the challenges that you face in your life. And it's about creating core stability. So what that means is I like to talk with entrepreneurs and be like, what are the challenges that you experience in your business? And we'll look at the gene keys because typically it's going to be the theme of the gene keys that are coming up. So I'll speak for myself because this is a prime example. The first 2 planets, the first 2 gene keys in my activation sequence are 36 and 6. And the shadow of these gene keys are turbulence and conflict. So when I look at my entrepreneurial journey and I'm seeing like, and I've experienced like so much turbulence, like it took me over 3.5 years to hit, major milestones in my business. And it was just, I've had a lot of emotional roller coasters, like, having my partner understand what it's like for me to be an entrepreneur while he's in the corporate space, like that brings conflict. Like I'm looking at my gene keys and I'm like, these frequencies are coming to life in my life. And so when you look at the gift aspect, so when I notice the shadows, I look at the gift aspect, which for these two gene keys is humanity and diplomacy. I really am able to share about my business and entrepreneurial journey from this lens of like, it's very human to have a turbulent experience. Like, can we please acknowledge this, that not everyone is going to scale quickly? There's nothing wrong with scaling quickly, but also that's just not the reality for a lot of people. Like bringing that diplomatic human perspective, and then also the highest frequency of these gene keys is compassion and peace. So it's like, how can you be at peace with your journey? How can you have compassion for yourself and others? And so I'm really looking at my gene keys, and it's like me embodying this energy allows me to begin creating this core stability in my business where it's like, I'm the foundation. It's my experience that's the foundation. It's not because I have like the perfect funnel or X amount of people on my email list or I'm generating X amount of money. Like it's really coming back to like my inner reflections and noticing who I am and showing up and expressing that. And so I feel like this is so unique because it's not cookie cutter. It's very much like my way of describing my gene keys is going to be so different than me looking at both of your charts and explaining like what your experience might be. So I hope that that gives a bit of an example, like just kind of a little test taste of like how I can start to get into it. I could talk for like 3 hours about it, to be honest, because I'm so excited, but that's just a little sample.
I love that. Yes, I'm so glad that you hit on that because I know myself and so many other people that I work with, that I collaborate with, our clients, like it's not that flashy ad they saw on Facebook that said, click here and earn 10K in 10 minutes or whatever. Like that can it happen? I guess probably. I don't know. Not for me, not for the majority of people I know. And mad respect to those who that was part of their design and that worked for them, like not putting any of that down. But I love having these conversations of that doesn't have to be the way, and that's okay. Like that could be part of your design and your intended journey, your intended path.
Yeah, I love that too. Absolutely. Um, and yeah, when we look at, the human design chart, struggle is a part of it. We all have all of the chart, and suffering isn't in there, but, challenge is definitely a part of what we live. Um, Shifting gears a bit, I've heard you talk about how human design can be your driver, while gene keys are the map. I would love for you to expand on that. Tell us what that means.
Yes. Okay. So what I just shared about my way of contemplating those two spheres specifically in my activation sequence and like, experiencing turbulence and conflict and compassion and all of those energies, it's kind of like, okay, well, I see these energies in my life and I'm experiencing them. I can see it. It's unfolding in many different ways, but what do I do with this information? And so for me, being a 6/2 sacral generator, I then come back to my human design and I'm like, okay, how can I, while processing this emotional and spiritual experience, take action in my business that's aligned for me being a sacral generator? So what that looks like is that I love being creative. This is just, I could just create content like all day, every day. Obviously, my podcast channel is like huge. And it's just because I love doing the things that I love doing. So then while I'm experiencing turbulence and conflict, if I'm in those shadow frequencies, I can come back to my design and be like, Kehla, where are you forcing things? Where are you doing things that you think you should be doing? Where are you initiating instead of responding and looking to co-create in your business and with people? Where are you absorbing the beliefs and perspectives of other people and taking that on as if it's yours, but it's not? Because I only have two defined centers in my chart, my G center and my sacral. So it's like I'm very open and susceptible to taking on other people's energy. So I come back to human design and I'm like, okay, what is my chart telling me? Like, where am I open? Where am I defined? Am I following my strategy? Am I following my authority? as I'm also simultaneously having clarity with experiencing the gene keys. And so I feel like these systems then marry together, because I'm like you said, Gwen, it's like this is the driver of how I'm operating physically, while I'm mentally and emotionally and spiritually, like I'm experiencing the gene keys. And that's not to say that human design isn't a spiritual experience, because it is, but I just find that it's a bit more masculine and structured compared to the gene keys. And this is why when these systems come together, I feel like it's a very yin and yang experience.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I love how you bring both of the system's strengths, like, yeah, this amazing language, this rich language of the gene keys, and this depth that it brings, this almost mysticism, but there's also science, and technology woven throughout, frankly, both systems. But yeah, you know, the gene keys go so deeply into the genetic codons and even the proteins associated with them. And, we could totally nerd out on all of that. But yeah, I really love that, how you've taken those two systems and made this really practical application. It's almost like, do you have a lot of fifth line energy? Because yeah, practical solutions you are definitely bringing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's the other thing too, is there's so many layers, like I'm talking about the gene keys, but then you can look at the spheres and the pathways that connect the gene keys. And then you can look at the line expressions. And even I've actually been really fascinated with the line expressions, because one thing I love about the gene keys compared to human design is, like, in human design, you'll see the 6 lines. So, I'm a 6'2", you're a 4'6", we have a 5'1" on the call. And it's like, these are our profiles. But then when we look at the gene keys, the line expressions go even deeper as you go through each sphere. And it's like, that's another place of contemplation. Like, it's basically a never ending rabbit hole.
Indeed, it is. I know. And I too love looking at all of the different line expressions for all of the different sequences. Yeah, it really does add so much more information and stability, I think, to the learning process. Really cool. I talked a little bit about your podcast earlier. I absolutely love it. And in fact, during episode 292, you answered some of my questions that I sent in. It was all about the core wound, the undefined centers, and brand or life's work. And that episode title alone really speaks to how creatively you weave these systems together with business. So one of the things you mentioned in that episode really resonated with me, and that was, you can market from any of the gene keys, define gates, define centers, channels, and you can pour from that full cup. I mean, I love that. It was like no one had ever really said that so well all together at one time. So I'll stop gushing and ask, what is it about you and your work that really compelled you to start the podcast? And what's your favorite thing about the podcasting?
Oh my gosh, podcasting. I think for anyone who is still sitting on the fence about starting a freaking podcast, is to just effing do it. I started my podcast 3 months. So I started my business. And when I say started my business, I mean, I like changed my Instagram and started posting inspirational content. Like, that's how it started. I started my podcast in March of 2019. And literally the very first episode is me literally saying, like, I'm a personal trainer. I work downtown Toronto. Like, I really want to have a mindset coaching business. Like, when I went back to listen to that first episode, I was like, oh my God, like it actually unfolded. Like, it just, and then I started to kind of dive into some later episodes, and I could hear my language shifting, because I wasn't fully associated with being a coach. I was like, oh yeah, like I'm building this business and this is what I want to do. And then all of a sudden the identity just came together, and now you go in 300 episodes later, and it's like all of a sudden I shifted into human design, and then I'm talking about the gene keys, and it's been an evolution. And so I feel like for me, one of the things I love is like when I find people that are, let's say, inspiring online, or I see them as a mentor, I want to know their full story, you know, because sometimes we see people and they're a multimillionaire and it looks like it happened overnight and it didn't. And so I think it's really beautiful that we take the time to share our story and go along with it and believe that it's worthy every chapter along the way. And what I can speak to after interviewing like over 75 people on my channel is that every single person completely undermines the value of their journey and their story. They think it's not a big deal because it's proximity bias. They don't realize the things that they've overcome or what they've created. And so for me, I'm like sharing my story, and then I'm sharing the story of other people, and I'm like, oh my God. And so it's just motivating to the point where I've created over 300 episodes, and it's such an incredible tool. I still go back and pull episodes from like 3 years ago to share with clients or with people and be like, oh, this will help you. And they're like, you have an episode for everything. I'm like, yes, because it's been going on for 4 years. So I'm really passionate about it. And now I'm getting more into being interviewed on other channels. And it's like, I literally love it. It's so fun for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting how you've essentially journaled your entire experience, you know, as a coach. It's really something.
Thank you.
Love it. Mm.
I love that. Now I'm like, oh my gosh, do I have the bravery to listen to my first episode from March 2020? But I'm sure if I went in with the right lens of like, look at how much growth I've had, not like, how embarrassing, should I take this down? Delete it immediately. um, no, I'm very proud of the journey as well. And so like I love that yeah, just podcasting is such an amazing way to document your journey. And I love that you hit on that piece of really like stepping into that identity of being a coach. I think that is so key. I know that was huge on my journey, and that is something I'm like super passionate about working with my clients on. Is you can get so much further once you embrace it. Like, but I fought it so hard. I was like, but I'm a teacher. And people are like, but you're literally, your title doesn't say teacher anymore. It says instructional coach. Even the school district is paying you to coach. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I don't know. I can't do it. Like, so it took forever to do that shift. So yes, I love that. You spoke on that because I know that's a thing that a lot of people go through. So yeah. Um, when you guys were talking about all the different spheres and lines and all the things, like I gotta say, I was pretty lost. Like, so where would you recommend somebody to start?
Yes. So I have a lot of resources, and we'll have the links in the show notes, but also I'll be honest, the Gene Keys website is amazing. If you go to the Gene Keys website, they have so much free content, and I always want to support people learning from the source. I think that's really important because the way that I share it would be very different than the way that the Gene Keys talks about it, because they created it, right? And so I think the biggest thing is actually one thing I do want to talk about right now so that people understand, like, what do you mean contemplation? Because we haven't talked about the Gene Keys approach. And I think that's actually the first thing for people to learn. And then they can go and look up their Gene Keys. So the Gene Keys approach, and this again is created by Richard, is how you contemplate the Gene Keys. So contemplation is this mix between meditation and concentration. It's really about observing and being curious. It's not about fixing or changing anything. So for example, when I'm talking about my 36 gene key, my life's work, which is that first gene key in the activation sequence, the way that you can contemplate this is being curious, inquiring into like, what do these frequencies mean? Being patient if the answer, quote, answer feels like it's not coming to you or there's no clarity. Being gentle with ourselves. Like maybe when I really feel like I'm stuck in turbulence and I'm like, okay, like let's move from the shadow. It's like being gentle with myself and patient in terms of like really allowing myself to marinate in the that full human experience so that I can gain clarity. And so it really is, again, I mentioned the slow burn aspect, but the art of contemplation is being meditative in the way that we observe something without needing to change it or force anything. It's a very meditative experience. So I feel like understanding this, and the book that I would recommend by Richard is called The Art of Contemplation. It's a small book, really great examples on different ways of meditating and using this work, not even just with the gene keys, but you can use the gene keys approach in life. Like you have an interaction with someone and maybe you feel like you're being reactive and you're like, oh, how can I be patient here? How can I inquire like the full picture rather than just my perspective? How can I have gentleness with myself and this person? Like it can literally be a way of living. And it's very gentle and it's very thoughtful and it has that kind of nurturing feminine energy. So I feel like this is really the first thing for people to understand, because then when you look at your gene keys and you're going WTF, like what is this circle? Like what is this line? Like, and all of a sudden your brain is trying to compute and it's not understanding. It's like you can just be gentle with yourself. It might take you a month to really understand that first gene key. And then it might take you like 3 months to really see the line expression of that gene key come to life. So it's not a destination. You don't just go through your gene keys in like a month and then move on with your life. Like it's like constantly popping up. This is why you're going to see they call it a hologenetic profile, because it's not just this linear path. There's no right way to start the gene keys, but I think the very first thing, like I said, is the art of contemplation. So I just wanted to dive into that so that people are like, okay, like you're giving me like the starting line of the race, or not the race, but the run that I'm about to start, the marathon, for example.
Thank you. Yes, we will be sure to get that website and that book linked in the show notes. I think that's a really good, actionable starting spot for anybody listening that just wants to get started.
Absolutely. And contemplation can be a challenge in and of itself. I know for myself, as someone who lived for, 49, at least 49 of her years entirely from my conditioning and my open centers, I have a completely open root, completely open head. And it was like, contemplation, what? I was go, go, go. And that was, a total pattern of, yeah, how I had lived in a very misaligned way. So yeah, now leaning into my gate two and, you know, learning that beauty of receptivity and that tantric quality that I carry, that has really helped me with the whole idea of contemplation and meditation. And now I have, a really rich meditation practice. So it is possible for even the most yang of us to get this stuff. And yeah, it's beautiful. It is a really beautiful practice. And I love the idea of taking contemplation into all areas. It's really brilliant. And it is a great book to start with for sure. Great recommendation. Yeah.
Well, thank you. This has been so incredibly informative and engaging. Just thank you so much for coming and sharing your knowledge and your passion with us. You both are just so passionate about this, and it makes me want to like know more and learn more. It's very like endearing. Yeah.
Indeed. Yes, it has been such a pleasure following you, learning from you, and now getting to know you just a little bit, having you here in our energy. I just even more. I'm a super fan at this point.
Thank you so much for having me on and asking such great questions and allowing me to just share like what brings me the most joy, because that's all I want to do. Is I do just want to share this work. I want to share it in a way that supports people while still honoring the source of where this comes from and just giving people something different to think about, because I used to be a very mental person. I was like a mindset coach, and then eventually it really shifted into spiritual mindset coaching, because it's like the mind and the body and coming back into that somatic experience. And I feel like both of these systems really give the tools and the opportunity for people to do that. So that's why I'm so inspired to share. So I'm really grateful that you invited me on and allowed me to talk about this, because I really enjoyed this conversation.
Absolutely. We're
Yeah.
so honored and grateful to have you. And I know that our listeners are going to want to connect with you. So, where are some of the best places for them to do that?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram at Kehla G. We'll have all the notes in the show notes, and my website will be there as well, kehlag.com. We talked about my podcast, Living in Fierce Alignment. And we'll have a link for freebies if you're somebody who wants to go deeper into the Gene Keys and see how this applies to business. And the thing that I'm really lit up about right now is my Gene Keys business guide, which you kind of had a taste of this in the conversation today, where it was like the Gene Keys meeting entrepreneurship and how this is actually going to support you in your business from this contemplative aspect, and like you really coming back to yourself and trusting yourself in your journey, and just kind of throwing out the cooker cutty approach to how you can do your business. So that's something that's really like on my heart right now. So tons of resources for you, and I'm really excited for the listeners. Feel free to reach out. I'm like super open to chatting with people. Like I really value that connection as well. So I just want to say that my DMs are always open.
Nice. Yes. And I want to really recognize you, Kehla. You mentioned the Gene Keys and all of their amazing generosity with their free content. You are absolutely one of the, amazing coaches out there, particularly with this incredible level of knowledge that you have. And you give away more content, and such high quality content than most any coach, human design or otherwise, that most would be selling for top dollar. I mean, some of your most incredible nuggets of wisdom can be found in those amazing freebies. The value of this content is superlative. So I would highly recommend you guys check out the link for her freebies. There are at least 14 well-curated goodies in there, videos, podcast episodes, journal prompts, so much more. It's hard to pick, but I think my personal favorite of yours is the Human Design Embodiment Guide for Business Owners. I love that. And it's massive. There is so much there, and holy cow, totally free. So yeah, everybody be sure to check those out. And then by all means, the Gene Keys Business Guide is, it's stellar. So thank you again, Kehla, for joining us. You bring the wow factor to our listeners, and I know they have been truly inspired by what you've shared.
Thank you. Your kindness, both of you today, like my heart is so full. It's like first thing in the morning for me, and I'm like, this is how I'm starting my day. Like I'm literally so grateful. I'm so excited about this episode. I'm really excited to connect with the people who listen. So thank you again for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you so, so much. My face is hurting from smiling so much. This has been such good, just positive energy. And it's not exactly like the beginning of my day, but it's a really good addition to my day. So thank you. And so this is for our listeners. And so speaking of you all, like, what are your takeaways from today? We would love for you to share this podcast with anybody that you think would enjoy it or benefit from it. And leaving a podcast review at ratethispodcast.com/CALYL for Create a Life You Love is always appreciated. And you can quickly and easily leave a review from any of your devices by grabbing that link in the show notes.
Absolutely. And if this approach, our approach, is resonating with you, and you too want to be a part of the Create a Life You Love movement and help create community, dramatically transform the coaching industry, we are currently accepting applications for the Create a Life You Love membership. Just head over to createalifeyoulovecoaching.com/membership. We'll have that link, of course, in the show notes. And for the month of February, we are running a super great deal where you can get the whole year of membership for just $2023. Payment plans available. If needed, just head to the link in the show notes for more details. And of course, we'll also have a link to connect with us if you have questions.
Absolutely. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for your feedback and support. And shout out to my friend Tom that I stayed with in Florida that came up with the 2023 idea. He mentioned it and I was like, no, that won't. Well, wait a minute. I was like, yeah, I like it. So you're welcome. February. Have a good day, everybody. Enjoy the journey. Thank you for listening to the Create a Life You Love podcast. We would love to hear from you about your biggest takeaways. Share them with us on Facebook or Instagram at Create a Life You Love Coaching. If you love this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. If you're ready to build aligned and sustainable momentum without overwhelm and burnout, we invite you to apply for the Create a Life You Love membership on our website, createalifeyoulovecoaching.com/membership. That's it for now. Enjoy the journey.